Hello and welcome back to Rada's Test Kitchen. My name is Blake Landeau and today we're going to be making some biscuits and gravy. I'm going to start out with using some all-purpose flour, salt, baking powder, and some buttermilk, and then we're going to top it with some egg for an egg wash. Here we're going to use a Robo Coupe, or a lot of people call it a food processor. This one's a commercial grade, and a lot of people at home have a little bit smaller capacities. The ultimate product that we're trying to get is pea-sized butter in the flour, so you can cut it with a biscuit knife, to cut it, but we're going to use it in a food processor today. So starting out, we're going to take the all-purpose flour and we're going to put that in here. There's 4 cups. To measure the flour, you want to lightly pack it. You guess, fill it up in a 1 cup and just edge it off. 4 of those. We have kosher salt, double acting baking powder. We're gonna start this up, blend that fully. We're gonna start with a pound of unsalted butter and we're gonna cut it in half, get a pound, and we're gonna try to cut it into close to 1-inch cubes. It's got to be cold so that way it cuts into the flour evenly. Okay, we've got our cold butter cut into cubes. We've got our flour mixture with the baking powder, the salt in the Robo Coupe. We're going to add these in there and try to get them broken up nice and evenly. Usually when the flour gets on the butter, it's easier to handle. Okay. So once it's in there, we just pulse it a few times, not much. You want to make sure that that butter gets broken down into about pea size. The purpose of that is the fatter the butter is, like the larger the chunks of the butter, the more flakier the biscuits you get. If you puree this mixture up too much to where it's almost like cornmeal, then it's going to be more like a bread dough. These are still a little chunky. We're going to break it down a little bit more. All right. A little bit bigger than pea, but it's good enough size for me. That way it gives it a nice flaky biscuit. Okay, now we have our flour mixture, which was fully incorporated in the Robo Coupe and then blended with the fat, or also known as the butter. You can use lard if you would like, but butter's been pretty good for a final product at the end. But like I said before, you want nice thick chunks so that way it gives you flakier biscuits. After this, now we're going to add the buttermilk. I like to use a cook spoon here to get it started. Kind of helps prevent your fingers from getting real sticky. Key to biscuits is to not overwork it. You don't want to overknead it. So get it started. We're going to flip it right onto the table. We're going to pull it together. Bring in each side. Once the dough binds, then you can start shaping it. You should be able to see the butter chunks in the dough, little chunks here and there. If you don't, you might not have such flaky biscuits. But that's the key to having cold butter. That's why it's so important, so they remain. All right. That's looking pretty good. Like I said, you don't want to have too much kneading going on. Otherwise you work those gluten strands too much and it becomes a tough dough. So you want it nicely brought together, not messing with it too much because you don't want to melt down the butter with your warm hands. All right, now that we have our biscuit shaped, we're going to go ahead and put an egg wash on top. This will help with the browning after or during baking. Take the whole egg, Rada handy stir, fully incorporate this egg, blend the white and the yolk together. Sometimes I've used just the yolk with a little bit of buttermilk. Sometimes I've used just the egg white whisked to the point where it's almost a soft peak, and that kind of gives it a nice little crispiness, I guess. The yolk gives it a nice browning. Sometimes people will cut the biscuit first and then add the egg wash on top, but I've found that this is a little bit quicker to do it all at once. Okay, we got a little bit of flour here. Our biscuit cutter, get a little bit of flour on it. Okay, we have this stone sheet pan that we're using here, and I got a little bit of butter on the bottom of it just to help prevent sticking. If you're going to combine the last little bits together, I wouldn't over knead it. These make for pretty good dumplings and soup as well. Don't want them touching at all. They will grow in size, so you need to give them a little bit of space to move. Usually they just rise because of the baking powder. I've rearranged the biscuits to be in a uniform shape on the cooking sheet, so it's uniform cooking inside the oven. We're going to put them in the oven at 425 degrees for a total of about 17 minutes. I put a sheet underneath to catch any drippings from the butter that might happen. It's typical that that happens. And we're going to set the timer for 8 minutes. Halfway through the cooking, we're going to pull it out, turn the pan around, put it back in and set it for another 8 minutes. After 16 minutes, then we'll know a little bit about how much longer it should be. There should be a little bit of browning on top, and you'll know. Our biscuits are in the oven right now, and now we're going to start on our sausage gravy. We have our fresh pork sausage here. The basis contents in that is brown sugar, some sage, a little bit of chili, salt and pepper, and a little bit of marjoram. Makes it really good. Then we have our fat, which is our butter. We're going to cook that down. We're going to add the butter after that. We're going to add the flour, which will then create a roux, which is our thickening agent that will help thicken our milk once we pour that in. Once that comes to a full boil, it'll become our gravy. And then we have our salt and pepper to finish it and season it. A lot of the times the biscuits and gravy is much better with pepper. So we're going to add a little bit more than just a normal seasoning. I've had our pan on this range for just a little bit under some low heat to get it nice and warm. I add a little bit of a light oil in the pan and I wipe it out. Basically, the first of 2 layers of oil in the pan to basically create a non-stick surface. Put just a little bit more oil in the pan before we add our pork. And get the sausage ground up and fully cooked. All right, we've got our pork sausage about 80% here, and as you can see, there's none, it's not been sticking to the pan, which is nice. Not very much browning. We can go a little bit longer and try to get some of the browning going. Then throw the butter in. Let that slowly melt down. Well, what the butter does is it adds the fat which then we'll mix with the flour to create our roux. All right, then we add our flour. This is becoming our paste, or our roux, R-O-U-X. It's the French word. Basically, it's our thickening agent, which is going to make our milk into a gravy. You really want to, and this is the most important part of this, is that you want this flour to cook out. You need it to cook out. If you don't cook the flour, then it'll taste like flour. So give it some time, be patient with it. Cook that all up. Try to get some of that flour off the bottom of the pan. You can see the browning that's taking place. A lot of that is coming from, well, it's accumulation between sausage, the flour, and the butter, which gives it really good flavor. All right. We'll add our cold milk. Stir that up. Try to get all the stuff at the bottom off. Then we're going to want to bring this to a boil. Once it comes up to a boil, it's as thick as that it's going to be. That goes for most thickening agents. If you add a cornstarch slurry, which you can do omitting the flour and the butter, and using cornstarch and water equal parts, you squirt a little bit in there, or pour a little bit in there, bring it to a boil. As soon as it boils, it's at its thickest point. I'm going to turn up the heat, speed up the process a little bit. All right, the biscuits, they're finished. Got a nice golden color to them. Nice flakiness to them. Beautiful in color. They did take a little bit longer than we expected. I kept them in there probably another 3 to 4 minutes or so. So a total of 19 to 20 minutes. Flavor is going to be just spectacular with this gravy. We now have it at, it's reached a full boil, and it's at a really good thick gravy stage. So now we want to turn off the heat, and we should season it accordingly. So you got to taste it, and it's definitely lacking pepper and kosher salt. Stir it together. I really like using this plastic spoon on this metal. It's not really always the best to use metal on metal, so it's nice that they offer the plastic spoon. All right, so we've got salt and pepper added. That tastes great. It's finished. All right, now we're gonna start by plating our biscuits. I'm gonna grab the two prettiest ones and go ahead and pull it apart for you so you can see the flakiness of it. It's generally best if you were just to pull it apart. It generally makes it look like you're getting a little bit more than you are when you pull them apart and put them on there. You can put the pretty side up. It's got the nice crispiness to it. Center it. Nice thick gravy with all that sausage in there. Just pour the sausage right on top. Well, that's a great American classic right there. Now that was our biscuits and gravy, and it's one of my favorites. I wasn't much of an eggs and bacon eater as a kid growing up. My mom always fixed me biscuits and gravy, and this is by far my favorite breakfast. I hope it works out for you. Give it a shot. If you have any questions, post down below, and I hope you enjoy.